One choice. One moment. One love story. Welcome to When He Chose Her. Enjoy the story. Some people don't raise their voice, they raise the price of your pride. The glass didn't shatter, but the sound still cut through the room like something far sharper. A thin stream of red wine slid slowly down the front of Clara Whitmore's uniform, staining the crisp white fabric with a quiet kind of violence that needed no force to be felt. For a second, no one moved. Forks hovered midair. Conversations froze. Even the soft jazz playing in the background seemed to hesitate, like the entire restaurant had taken a breath and forgotten how to release it. The girl who caused it laughed first. Light. Careless. Expensive. "Oh my God. Did you just ruin your own outfit?" she said, tilting her head with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her bracelet, something gold, something heavy, clinked softly against the glass she had just set down too hard. Or maybe not by accident at all. Clara didn't respond. Not right away. She looked down at the stain, watched how the liquid spread, slow and deliberate, like it had all the time in the world. Then she reached for a cloth, folded it once, pressed it gently against the fabric. No rush. No panic. No apology. That was the part that unsettled people. Not the spill. Not the insult. The stillness. Across the room, a man in a dark suit lifted his gaze for the first time since sitting down. Ethan Caldwell had been there for nearly 20 minutes, unnoticed, unbothered, just another customer in a place designed for people who expected to be recognized. He had ordered nothing extravagant. Steak. Medium. Water. No wine. No attention. But now his eyes were on her. Not on the girl with the loud voice and louder presence. On the waitress who didn't react. "Are you serious right now?" the rich girl continued, louder now, feeding off the silence around her. "At least pretend you care. That's what you're paid for, right?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. One man coughed. Another glanced at his phone like it suddenly became urgent. But no one spoke. They rarely did. Clara finished dabbing the stain and placed the cloth neatly on the tray in her hand. Then she looked up, not with anger, not with fear, just presence. "Would you like another glass, ma'am?" Her voice was even, soft, the kind of tone that didn't invite conflict, but didn't surrender to it either. The girl blinked, caught off guard for half a second. Then she smirked. "Wow, you really are good at this. It's like you don't even have feelings." Clara held her gaze. Calm, unmoving. "I have a schedule," she said. Somewhere near the back, someone let out a quiet laugh before quickly covering it with a cough. The girl's smile tightened. Cute. Very cute. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, deliberately. "Tell you what. Bring me another glass. And this time, try not to wear it." Clara nodded once. No sarcasm. No attitude. Just acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked toward the bar, her steps measured, steady, as if nothing had happened at all. But everything had. Ethan watched her the entire way. The way her shoulders stayed relaxed. The way her pace never changed. The way she didn't look back. Most people, in that moment, would have reacted, defended themselves, apologized too much, or worse, tried to fight a battle that was never meant to be fair. But she didn't. She absorbed it. Not like someone weak. Like someone who understood something the rest of the room didn't. He leaned back slightly in his chair, fingers brushing the edge of his glass. Interesting, he thought. Very interesting. At the bar, Clara poured the wine with precise control, the deep red liquid catching the warm light above her. Her reflection flickered faintly in the polished surface behind the bottles. For a brief moment, her hand paused. Just for a second. Then it continued, steady as before. When she returned, the room had resumed its low murmur, but the energy had shifted. Subtle. Tense. Like everyone was waiting for something they couldn't quite name. Clara placed the glass gently in front of the girl. "Your wine, ma'am." The girl picked it up, inspecting it like it might disappoint her again. "See? Was that so hard?" Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply stepped back, ready to move on to the next table, the next order, the next moment. But, before she could turn, a voice cut in. Calm. Measured. Male. "Do you always need an audience for that?" The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They landed anyway. The girl looked up, irritation flashing across her face as she followed the sound to its source. Ethan Caldwell met her gaze without effort, without tension, as if he had all the time in the world and none of the patience. "Excuse me," she said. He tilted his head slightly, a faint hint of something unreadable in his expression. "The performance," he said. "Is it part of the meal? Or just your personal entertainment?" The room stilled again. Not as sharply this time, but enough. Clara didn't move. Not yet. Her eyes flicked, just once, toward the man who had spoken. And for the first time that night, something shifted. Not in the room. Not in the girl. In the story itself. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. The silence did not break all at once. It shifted. Slowly. Like a room realizing it had been holding its breath for too long. The rich girl let out a small laugh, sharper this time, the kind that tried to recover control before it slipped too far. She leaned forward, placing her glass down with deliberate care, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied Ethan. "I am sorry, do I know you?" she asked, her tone sweet but edged, like something polished to hide the blade beneath. Ethan did not answer immediately. He reached for his water instead, taking a slow sip, as if the question itself was not worth rushing. His movements were unhurried, precise, the kind of calm that did not come from confidence alone, but from certainty. "No," he said finally, setting the glass down. "But I know the type." A few heads turned. Not openly. Just enough. The kind of attention people gave when something interesting might happen, but they did not want to be seen watching. The girl smiled again, though it faltered at the corners. "And what type is that?" Ethan glanced briefly at Clara, who still stood beside the table, her posture unchanged, her expression unreadable. Then he looked back at the girl. "The kind that mistakes volume for value," he said. The words landed softly, but they stayed. The girl's fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her glass. "That is a bold thing to say to someone you just met." "Not really," Ethan replied. "It is a pattern." For a moment, the girl said nothing. Her eyes flicked around the room, searching for agreement, for support, for anything that would tilt the balance back in her favor. But the room had already chosen its silence. And silence, in places like this, was never neutral. It leaned. Always. Clara shifted her weight slightly, the only sign that time was still moving. "Is there anything else I can bring you, ma'am?" she asked, her voice as steady as before. The girl looked at her, irritation flashing again, but it was weaker now, less certain. "No," she said shortly. Clara nodded once and stepped back, turning toward another table where a couple had been waiting patiently, their menus still closed. She moved as if nothing had happened. But Ethan noticed the small detail others missed. The way her hand brushed briefly against the edge of the tray. Not trembling, just grounding. Interesting, he thought again. He watched as she greeted the next table, her tone shifting slightly, warmer now, lighter, as if she had the ability to reset herself between moments. Not many people could do that. Most carried things with them. Let them spill over. She did not. "You think you did something impressive?" The girl's voice cut back in, quieter now but sharper, directed at Ethan. He did not look at her immediately. His attention remained on Clara for a second longer before returning. "No," he said. "I think you did." She blinked. "What?" "You showed everyone exactly who you are," he continued. Without being asked, the girl let out a short, humorless laugh. "You have no idea who I am." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You are right," he said. "But I have a very good idea of who you are not." The air shifted again. Not dramatic. Just enough. The girl leaned back, crossing her arms now, her posture changing from performance to defense. "And what is that supposed to mean?" Ethan stood. Slowly. Not abrupt. Not aggressive. Just inevitable. Chairs rarely made noise in this restaurant. They were designed that way. But the movement still drew attention. It always did when someone like him moved. He reached into his jacket, not hurried, and placed a card on the table in front of her. Not slid. Placed. Precise. "It means," he said, his voice calm, almost conversational, "that respect is not something you can afford. It is something you either understand or you do not." The girl looked down at the card, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion, then to something else. Something quieter. She picked it up. Read it. Once. Then again. Her posture changed instantly. Subtle, but unmistakable. Shoulders straightening. Chin lowering just slightly. The smallest recalibration of someone realizing the ground beneath them was not as stable as they thought. "Caldwell," she murmured, almost to herself. Ethan did not wait for her to finish the thought. He turned slightly, his gaze finding the manager who had already begun moving toward them, drawn by instinct more than instruction. "We are done here," Ethan said simply. The manager nodded quickly, understanding more from the tone than the words. The girl looked up again, something like disbelief flickering across her face. "Wait," she said, her voice softer now, the edge gone, replaced by something uncertain. "I did not realize," Ethan paused. "Just for a second, not turning fully back. That is usually the problem," he said. And then he walked. Not out. Not yet. Just away from the table. Away from the moment. Clara noticed the shift before she saw the cause. The way the room exhaled. The way the tension dissolved into something quieter, more reflective. She glanced up, catching a glimpse of Ethan as he moved across the room, his presence now impossible to ignore. For the first time that evening, her expression changed. Not much. Just enough. A question, perhaps. Or recognition. Something unspoken. Something just beginning. And somewhere between the fading echo of a shattered moment and the quiet return of ordinary conversation, something else settled into place. Not loud, not obvious, but certain. This was no longer just a story about a mistake in a restaurant. It had become something else entirely. The door did not slam when Ethan Caldwell left the dining room. It never did. Places like this were built to absorb noise, to soften impact, to make even the most decisive exits feel controlled. But everyone felt it anyway. Not the sound, the absence, the shift. Clara noticed it in the way the air settled, like something important had just passed through and left a trace behind. She continued working. Table 12 needed refilling. Table 7 asked for the check. A couple near the window wanted dessert recommendations they would not order. Life resumed, as it always did. But the rhythm was different now. Subtle. Almost invisible. Still different. Nearly 20 minutes passed before the manager approached her. He did not rush. He rarely did. But there was something in his posture that carried weight. "Clara," he said quietly, stopping just beside her as she organized a tray of glasses. "When you finish your section, I need you in the office." She nodded once. No questions. No assumptions. Just acknowledgement. Of course. The rest of her shift moved quickly after that. Not because it was easy, but because she chose to move through it that way. Efficient. Focused. Untangled. By the time she stepped into the back office, the noise of the dining room had already faded into a distant hum. The room itself was small. Practical. A desk. A chair. A file cabinet that had seen better years. And sitting in the corner, as if he had always belonged there, was Ethan Caldwell. He was not looking at her when she entered. His attention was on something else. A folder. Papers. Details. Always details. Clara paused just inside the doorway. Not surprised. Not entirely. But not unaffected either. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, directing the question to her manager, though her awareness was fixed elsewhere. The manager cleared his throat, glancing briefly at Ethan before stepping back slightly. "Mr. Caldwell requested a moment of your time," he said. Requested. The word lingered. Ethan looked up then. His gaze met hers directly. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. Just presence. "Clara Whitmore," he said, as if confirming something he already knew. She did not react to the use of her full name. "Yes." He nodded. Once, closing the folder in front of him. "You handled that situation efficiently." It was not a compliment. Not exactly. It was an observation. Clara held his gaze. It was part of the job. Ethan leaned back slightly in the chair, studying her with a level of attention that would have unsettled most people. But she did not shift, did not fidget, did not look away. Interesting, he thought again. Most people would have responded differently, he said. "Most people are not on the clock," she replied. There was a pause. Not awkward, not tense, just deliberate. Ethan's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "And off the clock?" he asked. Clara tilted her head slightly. "That depends on who is asking." The manager shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them as if unsure whether he should stay or leave. Ethan noticed. "That will be all," he said, without looking away from Clara. The manager nodded quickly and stepped out, closing the door behind him with quiet precision. The room grew still. Not empty, just focused. Ethan stood. Slowly. The space between them was not large, but it felt intentional. Measured. "I own this place," he said. Not as a declaration. As context. Clara nodded once. "I figured." "Most people do not," he added. "Most people are busy," she replied. Another pause. This one lighter, almost edged with something unspoken. Ethan took a step closer, not enough to intrude, just enough to shift the dynamic. You read the receipt, he said. It was not a question. Clara's eyes flickered, just briefly. It had inconsistencies. You corrected them, he continued. Quietly. It was faster, she said. Ethan let out a soft breath, something between a laugh and an acknowledgement. You do not like unnecessary scenes. I do not like wasted time. Their eyes held. Longer now. Not challenging. Not defensive. Just aware. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. Not the same one as before. This one was simpler. Cleaner. He placed it on the desk between them. Come by tomorrow, he said. 9 o'clock. My office. Clara glanced at the card but did not pick it up. Why? She asked. Direct. No hesitation. Ethan did not answer immediately. He studied her again, as if measuring something that could not be easily defined. Because I think you are in the wrong place, he said finally. Clara's expression did not change, but something behind it did. And you think you know the right one? She asked. Ethan met her gaze evenly. I think I know opportunity when I see it. Clara let the silence stretch, not as resistance, as consideration. Then she reached forward and picked up the card, turned it once between her fingers, looked at it, memorized it, and set it back down. I will think about it, she said. Ethan nodded. No pressure, no insistence, just certainty. That is all I ask. He turned then, moving toward the door, his presence shifting the air once more as he passed. But just before he reached it, he paused. For what it is worth, he said, without turning back, you did not need anyone to step in tonight. Clara's voice came a second later. I know. Ethan smiled. Not fully, just enough. And then he left. The door closed softly behind him. Clara stood alone in the small office, the card still resting on the desk, the faint echo of something new settling quietly into place. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. The kind of moment that does not announce itself, but changes everything anyway. The city felt different in the morning. Not quieter, just more honest. The kind of quiet that did not pretend to be anything else. Clara Whitmore stood outside the building for a moment longer than she needed to, her fingers wrapped loosely around a paper cup of coffee that had already cooled. 9 o'clock. That was the time on the card. Exact. Precise. Predictable. She glanced up at the glass tower in front of her, the kind of place where everything reflected something else. The sky. The people. The version of yourself you thought you should be. She exhaled slowly and stepped inside. The lobby was larger than necessary. Marble floors. Clean lines. A front desk that did not need a nameplate because everyone who walked in already knew where they were. Clara approached the reception without hesitation. I am here to see Mr. Caldwell, she said. The receptionist looked up, her expression polite but measured, the kind that assessed without appearing to. Name? Clara Whitmore. There was a brief pause. A quick check. A flicker of recognition. Then a nod. He is expecting you. Of course he was. The elevator ride was silent. Smooth. Controlled. Just like everything else in this building. Clara watched the numbers rise, her reflection faint in the brushed steel walls. She did not adjust her posture. Did not check her appearance. She had done that already. This was not about presentation. It was about presence. The doors opened onto a floor that felt quieter. Not empty. Just intentional. Offices with glass walls. People moving with purpose, but without noise. Clara stepped out, guided by a subtle sense of direction more than any visible signs. She found his office without asking. Or maybe it found her. The door was open. Ethan Caldwell stood near the window, his back partially turned, the city stretching out behind him in sharp lines and distant motion. He did not turn immediately when she entered. You are early, he said. Clara glanced at the clock on the wall. 8:58. I prefer not to be late. Ethan turned then, a faint acknowledgement in his expression. So do I. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. Sit. Clara stepped forward and took the seat without hesitation. No hesitation. No curiosity. Just movement. Ethan watched that. Not the action. The lack of unnecessary reaction around it. He moved behind his desk, not sitting immediately, his hands resting lightly on the surface as he studied her for a moment longer than most people would find comfortable. Do you know why you are here? He asked. Clara met his gaze evenly. You think I should be somewhere else? Ethan nodded once. That is part of it. He sat then, finally, the motion deliberate, controlled. But more importantly, I wanted to see if you would come. Clara tilted her head slightly. That was the test. Everything is a test, Ethan said simply. Clara did not smile, but something in her expression softened, just a fraction. Then you should know I do not perform well for them. Ethan's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close enough to recognize. You performed perfectly last night. Clara shook her head once. I worked. The distinction mattered. Ethan noticed that too. He leaned back in his chair, one hand reaching for a folder on his desk. He opened it, sliding a single sheet of paper across toward her. Look at that. Clara glanced down. Numbers, columns, revenue breakdowns, cost structures. Nothing labeled in a way that made it easy. Nothing simplified. Just information. Raw and intentional. She did not touch it immediately. Just looked. Then her eyes moved. Left to right. Top to bottom. Faster than expected. Slower than careless. This is not balanced, she said after a few seconds. Ethan did not react. Explain. Clara pointed lightly to one section, not tapping, not marking, just indicating. You are overcompensating for loss in one location by inflating projections in another. It looks stable on paper, but it is not sustainable. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. And you already know that. Ethan watched her closely now. Not surprised. Not impressed. Something else. Recognition. Go on. Clara leaned back slightly, her hands resting in her lap again. You wanted to see if I would say it out loud. And? Ethan asked. Clara met his gaze. I do not see the point in pretending something works when it does not. There it was again. That quiet refusal to play along. Ethan closed the folder slowly, his movements thoughtful now. Most people in this building would not have said that, he said. Clara nodded once. Most people in this building work here. The air shifted. Not tense. Not sharp. Just honest. Ethan stood, moving around the desk, not hurried, not slow. He stopped just a few feet from her, the distance intentional. I am offering you a position, he said. Clara did not react immediately. Doing what? Helping me fix what does not work, he replied. Clara's eyes held his. You have an entire team for that. I have an entire team that agrees with me, Ethan said. That is not the same thing. A pause. Longer this time. Clara considered him. Not the offer. Him. And what happens when I do not agree with you? She asked. Ethan's expression did not change, but his answer came without hesitation. Then, we find out who is right. Clara let out a small breath. Not a sigh. Not relief. Just acknowledgement. You are not looking for an employee, she said. Ethan tilted his head slightly. No, he admitted. I am looking for someone who does not need to be one. Silence settled between them again. Not empty. Not uncertain. Just forming. Clara stood then, the motion calm, deliberate. She glanced once at the skyline behind him, then back at Ethan. I have a shift tonight, she said. Ethan nodded. I assumed you would. Clara picked up the paper from the desk, folding it once, clean and precise. I will give you an answer after that. Ethan watched her. Not pushing. Not pressing. Just waiting. Take your time, he said. Clara shook her head slightly. I do not need much. And with that, she turned and walked toward the door, her steps steady, her pace unchanged. Ethan remained where he was, watching her leave, something unfamiliar settling quietly beneath his usual certainty. Not doubt, not confusion, something else, something that did not rush. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Caldwell was not thinking about outcomes. He was thinking about her answer. The evening air carried a different kind of weight when Clara stepped back into the restaurant. Not heavier, just more aware. The kind of awareness that comes after a door has been opened, even if no one has decided to walk through it yet. She tied her apron the same way she always did. Tight, clean, efficient, no hesitation. But her mind was not entirely there. Not scattered, just layered. The numbers from the paper still lingered somewhere behind her eyes, like a quiet echo she had not dismissed. You look like you are thinking too much, Mia said, sliding past her with a tray of drinks balanced effortlessly in one hand. Clara glanced at her, the faintest hint of amusement touching her expression. I am working, she replied. Mia smirked. That is not the same thing. Clara did not argue. She rarely did. Instead, she stepped onto the floor, the familiar rhythm of movement pulling her back into place. Orders, steps, timing. It all returned easily. It always did. But something was different. Not in her actions. In her attention, she noticed things faster. Patterns, delays, small inefficiencies that had always been there, just beneath the surface. At table 9, a couple waited longer than necessary for their check. At the bar, 2 glasses sat untouched while a third was being polished again for no reason. The kitchen bell rang twice before anyone moved. Clara adjusted without thinking. Redirected. Smoothed edges that most people did not even see. By the time the dinner rush settled into its steady pace, the room felt lighter. Not because it was less busy, because it was more balanced. The manager noticed. He always did. "You are moving differently tonight," he said quietly as she passed by the service station. Clara did not slow down. "Am I?" "Faster," he said. "But calmer." She considered that for half a second. "That usually helps." He nodded, though he did not fully understand why. Most people did not. Near the corner table, a group of business clients spoke in low voices. Their conversation filled with the kind of confidence that came from numbers they trusted more than people. Clara approached, her posture steady, her expression neutral. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked. One of the men glanced up, distracted. "We are fine." But Clara's eyes flicked briefly to the papers spread across their table. Not intentionally, just habit. Columns, figures, a structure she recognized. Or rather, a flaw. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then continued. She did not speak. Not this time. Not her place. But the thought stayed. It followed her as she moved from table to table, as she carried plates, refilled glasses, adjusted details no one thanked her for. By the time her shift neared its end, the decision she had postponed began to settle into something clearer. Not loud, not dramatic, just certain. She stepped outside during her short break, the cool night air brushing against her skin, grounding her in a way the noise inside could not. The street was quieter now. Fewer cars, fewer distractions. Just the city, breathing at its own pace. Clara pulled the folded paper from her pocket, the one Ethan had given her. She unfolded it carefully, smoothing the edges with her thumb. The numbers stared back at her again. Still flawed. Still fixable. She exhaled slowly. "You are not supposed to take work home with you." Mia's voice came from behind her, softer now, less teasing. Clara did not turn immediately. "I did not," she said. Mia stepped beside her, glancing down at the paper. "That does not look like a menu." Clara almost smiled. "Almost. It is not." Mia studied her for a moment, then looked back toward the restaurant doors. "That guy," she said carefully. "He is not normal, is he?" Clara folded the paper again, precise, controlled. "No," she said. "He is not." Mia nodded, as if that confirmed something she had already suspected. "So what are you going to do?" Clara slipped the paper back into her pocket. Her gaze lifted, not toward the building behind her, but toward something further. Something not yet defined. "I am going to finish my shift," she said. Mia laughed softly. "That is not what I meant." Clara turned to her then, her expression calm, but her eyes sharper now, more focused. "I know." There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. And after that, Mia pressed gently. Clara looked back at the street, at the quiet movement of a city that never fully stopped, only changed pace. "After that," she said, "I will decide where I am supposed to be." The words settled between them, simple but steady. Not uncertain. Not rushed. Inside, the bell rang again, calling her back. Clara stepped forward without hesitation, pushing the door open and returning to the rhythm she knew so well. But this time, it did not feel like the only place she belonged. And somewhere, in an office several floors above the city, Ethan Caldwell stood by the same window, looking out at the same skyline, not thinking about numbers, not thinking about strategy, but about a woman who had not yet given him an answer, and the quiet certainty that when she did, everything would change. The last table left just after 10:30, their laughter fading into the quiet hum of the street outside as the door closed behind them. Clara stood still for a moment, her tray empty, her hands resting lightly against its edge. The restaurant always felt different. At this hour, not empty, just honest again. The lights dimmed slightly. The music softened. The performance ended, leaving only what was real behind. She moved toward the service station, placing the tray down with the same precision she had used all night. No rush. No delay. Just completion. "You are staying late?" the manager asked, glancing up from the register. Clara shook her head once. "No," he paused, studying her for a moment. You usually do. Not tonight. That was enough. He nodded and returned to his numbers, the kind that never questioned themselves. Clara stepped into the back room, untied her apron, folded it once, then again, placing it neatly in her locker. Her movements were slower now. Not tired. Just deliberate. Like each action carried more weight than it used to. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded paper again, holding it between her fingers for a second before opening it. The numbers had not changed. Of course they had not. Cities stretched out beneath him like something he had already solved. He did not turn immediately when she entered. You decided, he said. Not a question. Clara stepped forward, stopping a few feet behind him. Yes. That was all. No build-up. No explanation. Just certainty. Ethan turned then, his gaze settling on her with the same quiet intensity as before. And Clara held his eyes. I will take the position. There was no smile, no visible reaction, but something shifted in the space between them. Not excitement, not relief, something steadier. On one condition, she added. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Go on. Clara did not hesitate. I do not agree to you. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Ethan's expression changed, just slightly. Not surprise. Recognition. You agree to the work, she continued. Not to me. A pause. Deliberate. Ethan nodded once. That is the only kind of agreement I respect. Clara exhaled softly, something in her posture easing, though her focus did not waver. Then we are clear. Ethan stepped closer, not enough to close the space entirely, but enough to redefine it. You start tomorrow, he said. Clara shook her head once. No, another pause. This one lighter. I start when I am ready, she corrected. Ethan studied her, the corner of his mouth lifting almost imperceptibly. And when is that? Clara glanced briefly toward the city behind him, then back. Soon. He nodded. No argument. No pressure. Just acceptance. I will have everything prepared. Clara reached into her pocket, pulling out the folded paper and placing it on the desk beside them. You will need to adjust this before I start, she said. Ethan looked down at it, then back at her. You are already working, he observed. Clara's expression remained calm. I am already thinking. A beat. Quiet. Intentional. Ethan let out a soft breath, something close to a laugh, but without the sound. That is more valuable. Clara turned then, moving toward the door without hesitation. But just before she reached it, she paused. Not long. Just enough. You were right about one thing, she said, her voice steady. Ethan looked at her, waiting. I was in the wrong place, she continued. Just not for the reason you thought. Ethan's gaze sharpened slightly. And what reason is that? Clara opened the door, her hand resting briefly against the frame. Because I stayed longer than I needed to. She did not wait for a response. She stepped out, the door closing softly behind her, leaving the room quieter than before. Ethan remained where he was, the folded paper now in his hand, the numbers no longer the most interesting thing on it. For the first time in a long time, something in his world had shifted without his control. Not disrupted, not broken, just changed direction. And somewhere between the quiet confidence of a decision made and the steady rhythm of what came next, a new balance began to form. Not built on power, not built on assumption, but on something far less predictable and far more real. The next morning did not announce itself with anything dramatic. No sudden realization, no sweeping change. Just light through glass and the quiet hum of a city already in motion. Clara Whitmore did not rush. She woke at the same time, moved through the same routine. Coffee, silence, a moment by the window that did not belong to anyone but her. But something had shifted, not in what she did, in how it felt. By 8:45, she was already inside the building again. Not because she had to be, because she chose to be. The receptionist looked up, a small smile forming this time, less formal than before. You are early again, she said. Clara nodded. It helps. The elevator carried her upward, smooth and uninterrupted, as if the building itself had already adjusted to her presence. When the doors opened, more people were there now. Movement, voices, energy, not chaotic, structured, but alive. Heads turned, just slightly, as she walked through the floor. Not because of what she wore, not because of who she was, because she did not hesitate. People noticed that. They always did. Ethan's office door was open again. He stood inside, speaking with two men in suits who carried themselves with the kind of confidence that came from years of being listened to. They stopped when Clara approached, not because she interrupted, because something in the room recognized her arrival. Ethan glanced at her once, then back at them. "We will continue this later," he said. Not dismissive. Final. The men nodded, gathering their papers, though their eyes lingered on Clara for a moment longer than necessary. Curious. Measuring. Always measuring. When they left, the room settled again. Ethan stepped forward slightly. "You said soon," he said. Clara met his gaze. "I do not like unfinished decisions." A faint shift in his expression. Approval, perhaps. Or recognition. "Good," he said. He gestured toward the desk where several folders now waited, organized with deliberate precision. "Then let us begin." Clara stepped forward, her attention already moving past him, toward the work. Not the office. Not the view. The work. She picked up the top folder, opening it without hesitation. Her eyes scanned quickly, absorbing, filtering, discarding what did not matter. Ethan watched her. Not the movement. The focus. "You do not ask for an introduction," he noted. Clara did not look up. "I will understand faster this way." A beat. Quiet. Intentional. Ethan moved around the desk, stopping beside her, close enough to observe, not close enough to interrupt. "What do you see?" he asked. Clara flipped a page, then another, her expression unchanged. "Delay," she said. "Not in the system. In the people using it." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly, not in disagreement, but in interest. "Explain." Clara pointed to a section, her finger hovering just above the page. "This process repeats steps that should have been removed months ago. It wastes time, creates dependency, and no one questions it because it looks familiar." She paused, then added, "Familiar is not the same as efficient." Ethan let out a quiet breath, something close to satisfaction. "You are correct." Clara closed the folder and set it aside. That was not the question. A slight tilt of his head. "No. You asked what I see," she said. "Not if I am right." A moment passed. Then another. Ethan nodded once. "Fair enough." He moved toward the window, his reflection catching in the glass again, but his attention remained on her. "Most people need time to adjust," he said, "to this environment." Clara picked up the next folder, already opening it. "I am not most people." There was no arrogance in the statement. Just fact. Ethan turned slightly, studying her again. "No," he agreed. "You are not." The morning moved differently after that. Not faster. More direct. Clara worked through the files with a rhythm that did not match the pace of the office around her. Not rushed. Not slow. Just precise. She asked few questions. Not because she did not have them. Because she answered most of them herself. And when she did speak, it was not to fill space. It was to correct it. At one point, a junior analyst stepped into the office, hesitating at the doorway. "Mr. Caldwell, the projections for." He stopped when he saw Clara standing beside the desk, papers spread out, her posture steady, her presence unexpected. Ethan glanced at him briefly. "Continue," he said. The analyst shifted, uncertain. "The projections need approval." Clara looked up then, her eyes settling on the document in his hand. "They are based on outdated assumptions," she said calmly. The analyst blinked. "I what?" Clara stepped forward, taking the paper, scanning it quickly. "You are compensating for a loss that has already stabilized. This adjustment creates a false increase. It will not hold." She handed it back. "Revise it." The analyst looked at Ethan, unsure. Ethan held his gaze for a moment, then nodded once. "Do it." The analyst left quickly, his certainty shaken, his direction clear. Clara returned to the desk, as if nothing had happened. Ethan watched her for a moment longer. "You do not ease people into change," he said. Clara did not look up. "Change does not need comfort. It needs clarity." The words settled into the room. Simple, but undeniable. Ethan turned back toward the window, the city stretching out before him, but his focus had shifted again. Not on the skyline. Not on the numbers. On her. Between them did not feel like distance. It felt like direction. The afternoon light stretched across the office in long, quiet lines, turning glass into mirrors and reflections into questions. Clara stood by the edge of Ethan's desk, one hand resting lightly against a stack of revised reports, her eyes moving across the numbers again, slower this time, not because she needed to understand them, but because she was choosing what to challenge next. The office around them had shifted in tone. Not tense, not uncertain, just aware. People moved differently now. Conversations paused when she passed. Not out of fear, out of adjustment. Change had a presence, and she carried it without announcing it. Ethan watched from a distance, leaning slightly against the side of his desk, his arms crossed loosely, his attention not on the reports anymore. On her. "You have reorganized 3 departments in less than a day," he said. Clara did not look up immediately. "I removed what was unnecessary," she replied. "That is not the same thing." Ethan exhaled softly, something between agreement and observation. "It feels like it is." Clara finally glanced at him, her expression calm, but her eyes sharper now, more certain. "That is because unnecessary things pretend to be essential." A brief silence followed. Not empty, just acknowledged. Ethan stepped closer, stopping beside her, his gaze dropping to the report she held. "And what happens when people realize that?" he asked. Clara closed the folder in her hands with quiet precision. "They decide who they want to be without it." Ethan studied her for a moment longer than usual. Not analyzing, not calculating. Something else. Something quieter. "And you?" he asked. Clara met his gaze. "I already decided." The words did not carry weight. They carried truth. That was enough. A soft knock interrupted the moment. The door opened slightly, and the same junior analyst from earlier stepped in, his posture more cautious now, but steadier. "Mr. Caldwell, the revised projections are ready," he said. Ethan gestured for him to enter. "Let us see." The analyst approached, handing over the documents, his eyes flicking briefly toward Clara, not uncertain this time, but attentive. Clara took the pages first, scanning them quickly, her expression unchanged. A pause. Then another. The room seemed to lean toward her without realizing it. "Better," she said finally. "But you corrected the outcome, not the cause." The analyst blinked, then nodded slowly, absorbing the words rather than resisting them. "I see that now," he said. Clara handed the papers back. "Good. Fix the cause." No lecture. No explanation. Just direction. The analyst nodded again and left, his pace quicker now, not rushed, but motivated. Ethan watched the door close, then turned back to Clara. "You do not train people," he said. "You reset them." Clara returned to the desk, placing the reports down in a neat stack. "Training assumes they were wrong before," she said. "Most people are not wrong. They are just repeating something that no longer works." Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering that. "And you think you are not?" Clara paused. "Not long. Just enough. I think I notice when I am." A faint smile touched Ethan's expression. Not broad, not obvious, but real. The kind that appeared when something aligned in a way he had not expected. "That is rare," he said. Clara did not respond. She did not need to. The moment settled into something quieter, more grounded. Outside, the city continued its steady rhythm, unaware of the subtle shift happening inside one office on one floor among hundreds. Time moved. Work continued, but the space between them changed again. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just closer. Later, as the office began to empty, the noise fading into the soft hum of late hours, Clara stood near the window, looking out at the skyline for the first time that day. Not to admire it, to understand it. Ethan approached quietly, stopping beside her, not speaking at first. They stood there, the distance between them no longer defined by roles or titles, but by something less structured. "You are not impressed," he said finally, his voice calm. Clara glanced at him briefly, then back at the city. "It is not about being impressed." "No." Clara shook her head slightly. "It is about whether it works." Ethan let out a soft breath, something close to a quiet laugh. "You reduce everything to that." Clara's gaze remained steady. "Because everything eventually comes back to it." A pause. Longer this time. Not uncomfortable. Just present. Ethan turned slightly, studying her profile, the way the light caught in her expression, not softening it, but defining it. "And me?" he asked, the question quieter than anything he had said all day. Clara did not answer immediately. She let the silence stretch, not as avoidance, but as consideration. Then she looked at him, directly, her eyes clear, unwavering. "You are still deciding," she said. Ethan's expression shifted, just slightly. "About what?" Clara held his gaze. "Whether you want things to work, or just look like they do." The words settled between them, not heavy, not sharp, just undeniable. Ethan did not respond. Not right away. For the first time, he let the silence remain unanswered. And in that silence, something changed again. Not in the office. Not in the work. In him. Clara turned back toward the window, her posture relaxed, her presence steady, as if she had already moved past the question. But Ethan had not. He stood there, the city reflected in the glass behind her, his thoughts no longer aligned with the structures he had built, but with something far less predictable and far more real. Because for the first time, it was not about control. It was about truth. And he was no longer certain he had been choosing the right one. Rain did not fall all at once. It started quietly, like a thought forming before it becomes a decision. By the time the office had emptied and the lights dimmed into a softer glow, the city outside had turned reflective, every street catching fragments of light and stretching them into something almost cinematic. Clara stood near the window again, but this time she was not studying the skyline. She was watching the rain. Not because it was beautiful, because it was honest. Ethan remained behind his desk, though his posture had changed. Less rigid, less certain. The question she had left him with earlier had not disappeared. It had settled, and it stayed. "You are still here," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. Clara did not turn. "So are you." A brief pause. Not sharp, just shared. Ethan stepped away from the desk, moving toward her, his footsteps measured, the distance between them closing without urgency. "I do not usually stay this late," he said. Clara glanced at him, her expression unchanged, but her eyes softer now, less guarded. "I do not usually start new jobs this quickly," she replied. A faint shift. Not quite humor. Not quite admission. Something in between. Ethan stopped beside her, close enough now that the silence between them felt intentional rather than distant. The rain traced slow lines down the glass, distorting the city into something less defined, less controlled. "You changed more in one day than most people do in a year," he said. Clara shook her head slightly. "No," she said. "I removed what was already in the way." Ethan studied her, the way she spoke, the absence of anything unnecessary in her words. "And me?" he asked again, softer this time, not as a challenge, not as a test, as something else. Clara turned fully now, facing him, her posture steady, her presence calm. She did not answer immediately. She looked at him. Not his suit, not his office. Him. "You are learning to ask the right questions," she said. Ethan exhaled slowly, something easing in his expression, though not fully. "And the answers?" Clara's gaze did not waver. "You are still deciding if you want to hear them." The words did not push. They did not demand. They simply existed. Ethan let out a quiet breath, something closer to a laugh now, though it carried no humor, only recognition. "You do not make this easy," he said. Clara's lips curved slightly, the smallest hint of a smile. "It is not supposed to be." Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that does not need to be filled. Ethan glanced toward the desk, then back at her. "Have you eaten?" he asked, the question unexpected, simple, almost out of place in a room that had held nothing but strategy all day. Clara blinked once, caught slightly off guard, though she did not show it fully. "No," Ethan nodded once. "Neither have I." A beat. Then another. "There is a place a few blocks from here," he said. "Not expensive. Not impressive." Clara tilted her head slightly. "Does it work?" Ethan met her gaze, the faintest trace of a real smile forming now. "Yes." Clara considered that for a moment. Then she nodded once. "Then it is enough." The rain had softened by the time they stepped outside, the city air cooler, cleaner, the noise reduced to something more human. No drivers rushing. No sharp edges. Just movement. They walked side by side, not speaking at first, their pace naturally aligned, neither leading, neither following. The restaurant was small. Warm light. Simple tables. The kind of place that did not try to be anything more than it was. Clara noticed the details immediately. The timing of service. The flow of people. The quiet efficiency behind the counter. Ethan noticed something else. The way she observed without judgment. Without superiority. Just understanding. They sat across from each other, menus untouched for a moment longer than necessary. "You are not impressed," Ethan said again, though his tone carried something lighter now. Clara glanced up, the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. "I am interested," she said. Ethan nodded slowly. "That is better." The conversation that followed was not loud, not dramatic. It moved the way everything between them had moved. Direct, honest, unforced. They spoke about work, about systems, about choices people made without realizing they were making them. And somewhere between those conversations, something else settled quietly into place. Not declared, not labeled, just there. When the food arrived, neither of them rushed. When the check came, Clara reached for it first. Ethan raised an eyebrow slightly. "You do not let me pay?" Clara looked at him calmly. "I do not need you to." A pause. Then Ethan leaned back slightly, accepting it without argument. "Then next time," he said. Clara met his gaze, her expression steady, but something softer now, something warmer. "Next time," she repeated. The words lingered, not as a promise, not as an assumption, as something simpler, something real. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets clear, the reflections fading as the city returned to its usual rhythm. They stepped out together, the night no longer heavy, no longer uncertain, just open. Ethan glanced at her once more, not as a billionaire, not as a decision maker, but as someone who had finally stopped trying to control the outcome. Clara looked back, her presence unchanged, her calm still intact, but now carrying something new, something shared. And in that quiet space between who they had been and who they were becoming, something settled into place without needing to be named. She did not raise her voice. She raised the standard. And this time, he chose to meet it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share the video, and share with us where you are watching from, and subscribe to When He Chose Her channel for more powerful, emotional stories that stay with you. Your support helps us keep telling stories about dignity, truth, and unexpected connections. Join our community and never miss the next story that might change how you see the world.